Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's live stream. What a week it's been! Crazy markets. Um, where do we start? A massive move in US markets, relatively speaking. I mean, the Nasdaq's done 1,000 points this week since the election. So when was election day in here? Tuesday, wasn't it? And started moving on election day and really hasn't looked back since then. S&P similar size move, so that's done. I think it's 4.5%, something like that. Just opening now again, and so far at least, just looking like a strongish start. A bit of a wobble in the overnight market, but let's see. I've been long the Nasdaq since last Thursday, a week yesterday, so I'm happy. But I've been trying to buy the dip all the way up this week, and of course, there really hasn't been much of a dip at all on the way up. Interestingly, European markets not so happy. I mean, this is the DAX, the German market. I mean, the Germans have their own issues at the moment politically, but the French market as well. Not exactly loving the news. Perhaps the threat of tariffs and all of that. Spooking markets on this side of the Atlantic. But we'll take a look at all of this. So if you haven't watched one of these before, welcome to the live stream. So I do these normally every Friday at 2:30 my time UK to coincide with the opening of the US market. What we'll do, we'll have a quick look at the major announcements for next week. Then I will have a look at the markets, the major markets, indices, a bit of FX, Bitcoin, oil, gas, gold, silver. And then if there's any stuff that you want to look at, if you put it in the chat, the YouTube chat, I'll take a look at it when I've looked at the major markets. But it has been a heck of a week. I mean, I think it was a surprise to many that Trump walked it so easily. It was on a knife edge, I think, based off the polls and everything else going into it. But it was pretty triumphant win for him in the end. So, but let's see how the markets have reacted. Stock markets have had a rocket underneath them, US stock markets. But let's take a look at things in a bit more detail. So, I think we're in for an interesting few weeks, at the very least. Risk warning, first of all, this presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones, that's me, accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay. I did a webinar a few weeks ago on my approach to day trading. It's the approach that got me in the Nasdaq trade that's up 1,000 points at the moment. Day trading setups for US indices, where to place stop losses, when to take profits, the low risk, high reward, false break approach to trading, and when not to trade, and what's right for you. Is short term trading right for you, or is a more medium term trading approach right? I think for most people, medium term trading is a much better approach rather than trying to guess every little wiggle in the market. You can have access. I've recorded that webinar. You can have access to it. I'll give you details as we go through the session. But looking ahead to next week, it's been a massive week this week. Obviously, we've had the US election. That was the big one. But we also had yesterday UK interest rate decision, a cut there. US interest rate decision, a cut there. Didn't really change much in terms of trajectory of markets. It's been a massive week. And there's a lot next week as well. On Wednesday, we've got US inflation data. So the consumer price index, that comes out Wednesday. On Thursday, we've got the EU GDP. So how well or not is the European economy doing? US producer price data. So again, a bit of inflationary data on Thursday. And I wouldn't normally flag up a speech, but we do have Mr. Powell giving a speech, the chairman of the Fed. He did speak yesterday on the interest rate decision, but with after the election, perhaps interesting to see if and what they're saying. I don't think they'll get political, but that's next Thursday as well. I think that'll be closely watched. And then on Friday, we've got UK GDP data. So how well or not is the UK economy doing? So lots of stuff again next week. I mean, I still think the more interesting market is the US, are the US indices. And when they start selling off, where does the sell-off stop? You know, I'm still long today. I want to buy the dip. Let's see if we get a dip. This market, you know, it's not going to go up forever. It's not Bitcoin in 2017 that just went up for 3 months or even more. But let's see. Let's see what happens. But maybe it will. All right, let's have a look. Let's have a look at the markets. So where do we start? Let us start with the US indices. So here we are at pretty much all-time highs on the S&P. The trend has been up. If you've watched this for any amount of time, I've been saying the trend's been up for ages, haven't I? For as long as I've been on YouTube, I've been saying the trend's been up. So I'm a buyer of the dip and blah blah blah. It has had a rocket put underneath it this week, following the US election. I'd buy the dip on the S&P. Looking on the dailies, I think we can see since the beginning of October around about 5,700 there's been support. It sold off to that just before the election, and has bounced and blasted out to all-time highs. So for me, a correction will be interesting. Should put an indicator on it. People love a squiggle, don't they? Let's put a squiggle on. Let's put the old RSI on it. Here we go, RSI. Let's put that on it, and let's change those settings because I don't like a 14-day RSI. Got no idea how to change the settings. Here we go. Is it there? Yes, there we go. Oh God, too much stuff. Let's put a 10-day RSI on. Let's do that. Let's get rid of a moving average. Don't care about that. And let's make that line a bit thicker so we can see it. There we go. And let's not make it purple. Let's make it green. Oh, I can't figure out how to do it. There we go. So it's actually it's not that overbought. It's only just tipped over into overbought, the RSI. It's interesting, isn't it? I thought it would have gone much more overbought by now. Anyway, blah. That's where we are. So yeah, buy the dip. Interesting to see what happens this afternoon. What I would be watching first of all this afternoon, since the election, the market has not threatened the previous day's low. So previous day's lows are a big thing for me in an uptrend. And on the S&P, yesterday's low is around 59.50 or thereabouts. So I think if we did get a bigger sell-off today, that looks interesting. So let's see what happens. At the moment, it has made a strong start. So yeah, let's see. But we've still got obviously 6 hours left of trade in the US. See what happens then. I buy the dip. On the Nasdaq, not surprising, buy the dip. It was interesting, the Nasdaq, because it has lagged behind the S&P since August. The Nasdaq all-time high was in July, and we've only just had another all-time high this week. The S&P July high, was taken out in September. So the S&P has outperformed the Nasdaq more recently. But here we are. The Nasdaq is now at all-time highs following the move yesterday. So so here we go. So what does this all mean? Is this, a new trend that starts following the election? I think I said in my newsletter the last weekend gone that stock markets don't really care who's in power. If you look at look at the S&P under Joe Biden, look at the S&P under President Trump last time round. Hardly any difference in performance. The Nasdaq performed slightly better in the first Trump presidency. In the last two elections we've had, 2020 and 2016, we've seen a strong move in the election week, like this week, and that move has carried on up. So, let's so if I was a betting man, I'd be expecting a bit more strength into year end from here. But let's see where it all goes. So Nasdaq, here we are on the Nasdaq. I bought the Nasdaq at 20,002 last Thursday on the way down. Big old stop on it, and the market has rallied like a maniac. So again, looking at levels for me today in the S&P, I've got a trailing stop at the moment just the other side of the overnight low. So if that gets taken out, I'll be out. But I will absolutely be a buyer of the dip. And for me, on the NASDAQ, yesterday's low is the first one to watch, around 20,900. What happens there? So if we did get a 200-point drop in the NASDAQ this afternoon, I think it's interesting. So that's that. That is the old S&P and the NASDAQ. The Dow was losing a bit of momentum yesterday, and actually today as well. So that's interesting. So that was yesterday on the Dow, a bit sideways, and a bit sideways so far today. So we have seen, occasionally a bit of a disconnect between these three indices in recent months. Obviously the Dow is quite a different makeup. The Dow is only 30 stocks. So perhaps some of the more traditional stocks are thinking, okay, let's rein things in a little bit now. Let's not go crazy. But the Dow anyway, all-time highs again this week. So that's it. It's all positive. For the US, the Russell, the smaller cap. I mean, this has definitely lagged the other indices overall. But, obviously had a good move again this week. Well, that's coming off a bit today. That's interesting. Oh, it's coming off a little bit. But we have these old highs for the Russell, the small cap, from 2021, around 2,500, 2,450, 2,500. So the Russell is not at all-time highs. I don't pay that much attention to that market, I must admit. I'd rather buy the markets that are stronger, which is the NASDAQ and the S&P. So let's see. So that's it. US markets, absolutely love it so far. Let's see how it carries on. But perhaps if we get a dip later today, or at least going into next week, I think it'd be an interesting time for these markets. So that is still very much my focus. If we bring it back, though, to the other side of the Atlantic, this side of the Atlantic, FTSE, doesn't like it. FTSE, as usual, doing its own thing. So the FTSE has been clobbered a bit there. So at the moment, trading probably at its worst levels in about 3 months, the FTSE. It really is. I do look at the FTSE, but, the trend is up from the COVID lows, but it's been a real underperformer, at least this year, and probably going back further. But maybe we'll see it snap back. I don't know. The big trend is up. So if I was a buyer of the FTSE, I'd want my stop at least the other side of the summer lows at 7,900. That's that. The French index, again, not exactly loving it in France. So, I do wonder if this is all to do with the threat of tariffs and all of that, and the US getting more insular, maybe, and more protectionist under Mr. Trump. Who knows? Let's see what happens. Maybe it's a bargain. Maybe the market's being too pessimistic. But that's that. So, And the DAX, the German market, it's been a bit chopperama this week, the German market. We saw, I think the coalition has collapsed, hasn't it? I think when, don't even know his name, tried to sack the finance minister, and it's all fallen apart. For the Germans, isn't it? But so a bit of domestic difficulties, should we say, as well for Germany, perhaps. The big trend is up for the DAX. All-time highs in October on the more short-term chart. 18.9 has been support, but again, like I say, I'd much rather trade markets that are moving rather than just sideways, and that is very much the US markets at the moment. Japanese market, again, we've had that strong bounce back off that crazy move we had in the summer, but all a little bit sideways since then, so nothing too exciting for me there. So for me, at the risk of repeating myself, US markets are the most interesting ones for me at the moment, and it would just really interesting if we did have a bit of a sell-off over the next few days to see where it all stops. And of course, if you thought, well, these US markets have completely overreacted to the election this week, then I wouldn't go short at the moment, but if I was going short, then a stop above yesterday's highs or the overnight highs is always an option. So let's see. So that's that. Stocks, quite the incredible move for stocks this week. The dollar index, the dollar again had a big move. There's the move, early hours of the morning, from about midnight Wednesday UK time. So as the polls presumably were shutting in the US, big move in the dollar index. It closed about 103.40 and it traded as high as 105.40 on Wednesday. So a big 200-point move on that. But it has calmed down a bit since then. I don't know on the dollar index. We were talking about it a bit in the WhatsApp group today. It has been broadly sideways, the US dollar, for the last year. And yes, a bit of short-term excitement, short-term volatility this week, but it doesn't really change that sidewaysness. So who knows for the US dollar? I don't know. Yes, wait and see. I don't know, would I buy it? I'd probably buy it rather than sell it at the moment, but I'll just sit on my hands and see what happens. Have a quick look at bond markets. I mean, US Treasury bonds, we've had the election this week and we've had the interest rate decision this week. The US T-bonds, have been sliding since September. And if we go back, that's the big trend for T-bonds from COVID times, March 2020. So the big trend has been down. And the only question, and it's a big question, I think, has it been trying to break out of that downtrend over the last 12 months? Who knows? Not me. But I think we've got an interesting couple of weeks ahead in T-bonds because we have, it had been in an uptrend since sort of October last year. It's dropped back to where it was in June. Do we see T-bonds perhaps gain or start to turn again in the next few weeks? I don't know, but I think it's interesting anyway. We've had a couple of days of strength, but again, this is the hourlies now. The big trend is still down. The textbook trade would be to be a seller still. We've got these old highs from end of October coming up. But I do wonder, looking at the bigger picture, will we start to see a turnaround in T-bonds? I don't know. Interesting market to watch, given, of course, what's going on in the US with the election and all of that stuff. So that's that. Gold, I would still be a buyer in gold. I do wonder, it was my son who made me think of this, and it shows you're getting old, doesn't it? When you have a chat to one of your children and they come up with an idea about markets rather than who can get the fastest time on Gran Turismo on a PlayStation. But he was talking about the tariffs and stuff, and of course, if they do introduce tariffs, so suddenly let's say there's a 20% hike on anything coming into the US, which makes it more expensive than the domestic product, the domestic manufacturers are maybe just going to rack their prices up a bit back towards the import price. So perhaps we see a resurgence of inflation again. I don't know, but it made me think. I don't think about these things very often. So if inflation is going to be a thing again in the US, make inflation great again, maybe gold is going to have a bit of another day in the sun or another few years in the sun as an inflation hedge. I don't know. I mean, gold's had a great run anyway this year. It's outperformed, or it had outperformed when I last looked a week ago, the S&P this year. I mean, it started the year about 2050 or something, and it touched 2.8. So we've seen a big move in gold. I would, based off the dailies, I'd still be a buyer of gold. So for me, if I was a buyer today at 26.90, the closest I'd have my stop the other side of 2600. The October lows, maybe even give it a bit more wiggle room, the other side of 25.50 or thereabouts. I think it's interesting though, because it has done so well this year. What does a change in US president, of course he doesn't come in until January, mean for the trend in gold? So for me, I'd still be a buyer. Interesting market to watch and see what happens there. Silver, silver is a bit scrappier, I think, but silver, did hit multi-decade highs or highest since 2013, 10, 11-year highs, so I'd still be a buyer of silver as well. I just don't think it's as clean a trend as gold. If I was a buyer of silver, I'd have a stop probably at 29 or somewhere at the moment, but I think gold is the more interesting market at the moment. And, for me, quite a bit of volatility over the last week. But I'd still rather be a buyer rather than a seller of the old gold even. While we're on the subject of precious metals, or the shiny stuff, I thought the move in palladium over the last couple of weeks was quite interesting. I mean, palladium, crazy market on the way up, and an equally crazy market on the way down over the last couple of years. And it had been building a recovery since August. Interestingly, to me, it completely got exhausted. And those old highs, those December 2023 highs at 1250-ish, and it's had a fair old slide, almost 20% slide back in the last couple of weeks. But if you were, I think it's an interesting market, if you were positive on palladium, do we see the bounce next week? Because we've got these 984 lows. So that could be an interesting market to watch. It's still weak today, so I wouldn't be a buyer just yet. But I think it's interesting today to watch and see what happens, and into next week. So that's that. While it's in my head, let's have a look at Tesla. Because, of course, Mr. Musk played his part, didn't he, I think? Helping Mr. Trump. Now, I would have gone short Tesla this week on that run-up, and I would probably still be in the trade, but I'd be close to getting stopped out. And, of course, so interesting, I think, because Tesla had been sliding since November 21, so we're 3 years into that slide. This whole 270 to 300 has been a barrier, and it's gone through it today. Oh, I'd still, do you know what? On the first day of weakness, I would still short Tesla. But is it going to be different now? I mean, who knows what sort of role Mr. Musk ends up with? How is that going to impact his business? I don't know. Let's see. Let's see what happens. But I do think, I mean, Tesla's had a big old run now, isn't it? We had the earnings in October. It was 215. It's up 50%, Tesla, in the last 2 weeks. That is quite phenomenal, isn't it? So for me, I still think the trade is short Tesla, but I would have been too early this week in going short Tesla. But who knows? If they make him, who knows, overall supreme financial boss of everything in the US, that could have some ramifications, couldn't it? But I did hear this week, I was listening to him this week saying you can't have a cabinet position unless you divest yourself of your financial interests. And I don't think old Elon is going to dump all of his Tesla, is he? So let's see what happens. But interesting to see what happens with all of that in the next couple of months. So that's Tesla. Anyway, back to the broader markets. Crude oil. It's been a bit bangy around this week. Crude oil. I think what's been interesting. I talked about this a bit in the WhatsApp group. These old highs from October on the hourly chart around about $73. 73 on Tuesday, 73-ish on Wednesday, and 73 in a little bit on Thursday. Can't get through 73. So again, if you're going to go short oil up here, stops above 73. Give it a bit of wiggle room. Stop at 74 maybe. And does the market sell off back to at least the October lows below 68? Don't know. So it's a little bit, it's just been a little bit chop, hasn't it, since September. But I thought it was interesting that 73 level, it just can't get through it. And of course, if it broke 73, I'd change my mind and I'd look to be a buyer. But overall, this trend in oil for almost 2 years now has been pretty sideways. Big sideways range from the mid 60s to 92, 95. Big old range, but no real trends. So that's that. So, but I thought it was interesting on the hourlies at least that 73 continues to hold the line. Natural gas, it's been just crazy natural gas, isn't it? Again, arguably sideways for the last year or so and a bit more. All a bit choppy. I haven't really looked at it or traded it. I don't know. If I was a buyer, I'd put a stop under 210. But really, I'd sort of be sitting on my hands a bit with natural gas at the moment. Even on the hourlies, it's quite sideways for the last few weeks. So nothing too exciting for me in there. And of course, Bitcoin as its move out to all-time highs. Not much follow through though. But anyway, I mean, so if I was a buyer now, if I was a buyer over the break of Bitcoin, I would have a stop at 64 at least. That would be my stop. Of course, you could take the view where all the crypto nerds are getting too excited by the Trump win. It's overshot. Let's sell it. Go short. Go short. So I was going short Bitcoin. I'd be maybe an 80 stop on that. Go short and see if it pulls back into that range. So we had the surge on election day or the day after the election, and then not much since then, really. But the big trend for Bitcoin going back to November 22, so 2 years ago, the big trend is up. So I'll be a buyer of the dip anyway. And the more recent trend is up as well. So for me, I'd rather buy a dip, to be honest, than do anything at the moment. But worth noting that it did move out to all-time highs this week, the old crazy crypto. And some of the currencies, we'll quickly look at the euro against the dollar and pound against the dollar. Again, it's just a bit choppy. I don't know. Like we saw with that dollar index, sharp move and then not so much. So the euro, 107 was a level for the euro, 107.70, the lows from August. It's broken through and it's just flip-flopped around. So I don't know what to do, what I do with that one. Pound against the dollar. The trend since whenever it is, September, is down. But the trend since, we go back March 23, the 18-month trend is up for the pound against the dollar. And again, this week, since the election, lots of volatility, no real direction. So I've got not much of an opinion on that. I'd be a buyer if it drifted back down below 129 and I had to do anything. I'd be a buyer, I think. But a tricky market, I'd much rather trade the markets with the clear trends, which so far are US stocks, US stock markets. So interesting to see, what does happen. I think we could have, again, given perhaps a different approach from the US under Mr. Trump, we could have more volatile foreign exchange markets in the years to come than we have maybe had for a couple of years. But at the moment, we're just seeing, I think a lot of noise and not much in the way of direction, really, at the moment. What's sterling yen doing? Not a lot there either. So that's it. So what to watch next week? Loads to watch. US stock markets for me. Do we see a bit of cooling off here? European stock markets, they've been a bit nervous, I suppose, over the last few days. Do we see a more definite move in European stock markets? US Treasury bonds, do we see it start to turn around ahead of the old lows from earlier in the year? And gold, do we see it? Do we see this big trend continue, or are we going to see a shift in sentiment towards gold with the prospect of a Donald Trump presidency being different? I don't know. Let's see what happens. But plenty to watch. So what I'll do now, we'll get into the stuff that you want looking at. So if there's stuff you'd like to have a look at, put it into the chat. I'll jump back onto this for a minute. So a quick commercial break. I run a WhatsApp group. I've run it for 18 months. I do a daily update in the morning. I do an update for the US in the afternoon. I talk about markets I'm watching that look interesting, trades I'm running. I've only run that NASDAQ trade for the last week, but it's been a good one, obviously. And a Q&A. Any questions, people can fire it in throughout the day. If you'd like to try it, go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. And if you put in, the link to all of this stuff is in the description. And if you put in the code YouTube to the subscription for the WhatsApp group, you get 20% off. And if you join the WhatsApp group, you get access to that webinar. There are actually 3 recorded webinars you can access. So in total, there is about 3.5 hours of exclusive webinars done by me that you get as a member of the WhatsApp group. And I'll be doing another live webinar in the next couple of weeks because I'm due another live webinar. So if you sign up, you get that. So it is well worth even 1 month subscription. You subscribe on a month-by-month basis. You don't have to stay in forever. Most people stay in for at least 5.5 months. My stats tells me, so that's good. They're happy. And some people have been in right from the beginning, since when it's been running 18 months ago. So I run a trading course as well. It's got 5-star Trustpilot reviews. I run a newsletter that's free. Goes out every Saturday when I can be bothered. I'll definitely send one out this weekend though. If you go to the website and put your email address in that, it's on the front page of the website, you'll be added to the newsletter list. Okay, so blah, 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 that's all of that. And it's all on the website. So sign up to the WhatsApp group, and you get all these updates throughout the day from me. Right, let's take a look. And actually, to find out who I trade with, I do all my short-term trading with them. Go to the website, bit.ly/David Trades. Cheap, tight spreads, wide range of markets, and you can trade from a relatively low level of risk. I will talk more about who I trade with in the weeks to come. I do can do more with them, but that's it. And all of this stuff is in the description. Okay, let's take a look. So someone's put in. There's only one request so far, so this can be a short webinar. Intel. Let's have a look at Intel. INTC. Intel. I'm going to think, is it still languishing a bit? Oh, it's having a bit of a run, isn't it? It's interesting, isn't it? I don't know what to do. I would go short if I had to do anything. Intel, we had the big gap down on earnings back in August. So they closed at about 29 and they opened at 22. So a big move off the earnings. We've had the rally since then and it's still strong. But I would say, you know, the trend is still down. So for me, I would be looking to go short when it gets weaker with a stop above 30. So that would be my trade on Intel. So there's no trade for me at the moment, but I would sell it when it stops going up. And maybe today's the day it stops going up. It's sort of pushed a little bit higher. Monday maybe. So I go short Intel with a stop above 30 because the trend is down. That's what I would do with Intel at the moment. I would not be a buyer because it's been sliding all this year. So at the moment, I don't believe the rally would be my approach on Intel. TBCG. I'm sure I had these on my list, you know. Is this on my list of interesting companies to look at? Yes, it is. You see, it's on my list as well. I haven't bought them. I think their dividend yield is quite attractive. And I was sort of looking at them back here when they had results. Yeah. So for me, I don't know. But they've sort of fallen out of the trend, haven't they? So I'd be tempted to give them one last go as a long-term buy. I'd rather buy the dip and I'd have a stop below £22. This is in sterling, this one, because UK listed stock. So I would buy it. I'd rather buy the dip, but I'm a bit concerned that they have sort of fallen out of that trend over the last 6 months or so. So yeah, so it's on my list of stuff to watch, but yeah, I haven't bought it yet. And BATS, the other one you mentioned, that is one I actually own. So I own that because in an ISA, because it's a good divvy yielder. And I've got a confession to make here. I bought these ages ago and I should have sold them up here, never sold them. I've still made money on them because their divvy yield is quite good, but I've given back a chunk of gains. So I'm sort of hanging on again. But I think it's interesting. They have broken out of that downtrend. That downtrend, let's change that colour line, from June 22, broke out. Is this the turnaround for British American Tobacco? Let me just have a quick look and see what their dividend yield is at the moment, because I think it's quite a chunky one, you know. I'm sure there's a way of seeing it in TradingView, but I can't figure it out. So let's have a look. BATS, British American Tobacco. Here we go. Let's have a look. Divvy yield is BATS 8.5%. So 8.5% dividends at the moment. So I think it's an interesting one if you thought the worst was behind it. So for me, if I was a buyer now, I'd have my stop probably at 25 quid. So maybe 10% away to see if this recovery continues. But I think for an investment stock, for me, that's quite an interesting one. Like I say, I hold them anyway, and I should have sold them before. I've done all right out of them over the last, I think it's 4 years, because the dividend yield's been all right. But I would have done much better if I'd have sold them up here, obviously. So let's see what happens. But I think that's an interesting one. Yeah, TBCG dividend. Let's have a look at that. Now you've mentioned that. TBCG dividends. What's the dividend yield on that? 6.7. Yeah, so BATS is still better. But yeah. Would you buy Intel long term? No, I wouldn't, because the trend is down. You know, there's enough stuff out there where the trend is up that I'd buy that. So, for example, I've still got about 20 US stock positions. My best performer at the moment is this one, Bank of New York. So I've been in that, I don't know, since before the summer. IP, International Paper, is another one I've got, which has absolutely gone like a rocket. So I'd much rather buy, I'd much rather buy stuff that's going up rather than trying to second guess something like Intel that has just been going down all year. So for me, I don't, long term on Intel, I don't care about it until it turns that trend around. So yeah, let's have a look at Peloton. Peloton, what are they doing? Peloton, the darling of lockdown, of course, and not so much since then. Look at that. Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? So Peloton, the old bike company, wasn't it? Stationary bike. Cost an absolute fortune. And then didn't someone have a heart attack on one of them or something like that? Or there was a few injuries, wasn't there? I think. And anyway, whatever. But 166 January 21 and $8 today. So are they turning the corner? It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it has broken out, hasn't it? I can see why, it's someone would mention it, because it had been downtrend, 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 and it is sort of having a go at breaking out, isn't it? What do you reckon? So I would be a buyer. I'd buy it. The only question is, where does the stop go? And this is always the issue with these ones that go a bit nuts, because the stock has doubled in the last month. So as usual, I'd rather buy a pullback. I want my stop at around $4, which is a 50% stop, which is too far away for me. So yes, I'd buy a dip. I think a dip would be interesting to see just how much commitment there is to buying into this recovery. So yeah, interesting one, nice run. I'd buy a dip personally. What are these US markets doing? They're going to come off a little bit, or maybe. Any thoughts on American battery technology? American. I'm guessing what they do is in the description, is in their name. American battery technology. Oh, horrible. Let's put that on a daily chart. That's a bit too. You know what I'm going to say? It's a bit of a too bombed out for me, and it's too small as well. So not too much interest for me, because it's just been drifting, hasn't it? Look at that though. It went nuts, didn't it? So it's gone from $73 to 98 cents. Are they just a battery manufacturer? Let's have a quick Google. American Battery Technology Company. Powering the future of sustainable energy. Status quo is the enemy. All right. Well, are they a lithium miner? Blah, 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 blah. Interesting. Market doesn't quite believe it though recent years, does it? So yeah, not one for me, to be honest. It's just a bit boring and drifty, isn't it? So yeah, if I absolutely had to buy it, I'd put a stop below 80 cents, but I'm not a fan of these stocks that have dropped like 99% until they start to turn around. That was nuts though, wasn't it, that move? And the other one, Alibaba, they did look a while ago like they turned around, and then they started recovering, and then they fell again. And I think the last time I looked at it, I would probably have been a buyer, but let's see what that would have done. Depends when I looked at it. I just can't see it. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I remember looking at it back here in 23, looking like it turned the corner, finally broken out that downtrend. All went a bit sideways, held above the old lows. It's had a run back up, and it's run out of steam again, hasn't it? At 121, the highs from January 23. So to me, that's all a bit sideways over the last year and a half, isn't it? So it's a nothing one for me. If I had to do anything, I don't know. It's interesting. It's not, I suppose, again, perhaps the threat, because they're a Chinese company, aren't they? Perhaps the threat of tariffs is having an impact. I don't know. So for me, yeah. If I was a buyer, I'd put a stop the other side of 90. But I don't. For the moment, there's nothing that makes me think I need to pull my finger out quickly and be a buyer. So yeah, not one for me at the moment. Alibaba. If it sells off a bit more, back to like the 80 or below again. I think it looks interesting, but not one for me. Let's see what's done well this week. I'm going to have a slight diversion. Let's have a quick look in the S&P. What's had a good week this week? Where's the percentage change? I've got too much information here. Or today, what's having a good day today? Axon, Expedia, what's having a bad day today? Akamai Technologies, Airbnb. What's had the best month this month? Tesla, second best performer in the S&P over the last 2 weeks. Palantir, they did really well. What's done badly? What could be a bargain? Super Microcomputer. They're getting absolutely clobbered, aren't they? That wouldn't be a buy for me. But they are. I mean, that again. Anyway, I digress. Let's have a look. Alibaba, Coinbase Global. Coinbase, the old crypto exchange, isn't it? What have they done lately? Yes. So they're, again, having a bit of a run. Make crypto great again, perhaps. What would you do though? I mean, what would I do? I don't know. I wouldn't do anything at the moment because we're below those old highs. It sort of has, since March, fallen out of that trend, isn't it? So if I had to do anything, I would go short. This is my counter Trump trade. This would be selling Coinbase and selling Tesla, but it's still strong, isn't it? I think if it breaks 283, it looks a bit more interesting to me. But yeah. So for me, it's not. I don't know. If you were to buy it, where would you put your stop if you were to buy it? This is always the problem for me with some of these stocks. Where does the stop go? I'd want it at the very least, the apps, which again would be too tight for me, the other side of the Wednesday low, but that's $40 away. It's 15% stop, and it's only 3 days ago. So for me, it's a bit of a wait and see, the old Coinbase. If it broke 282.85, let's say, then it starts to look a bit more interesting. But I wonder, is it going to, if things, assuming that US stock markets are not going to go up forever now, when things start to calm down next week, are we going to see some of these stocks have a bit of reversal? I don't know. Let's see what happens. But yeah, it's a wait and see for me, that one, Kev, at the moment. The old Coinbase. The dude in Sex and the City had a heart attack on a Peloton and the stock dropped 10%. That was it. Yes, that's what it was, isn't it? Can we check Costco? Surely it's a moonshot. Let's have a look. Costco to the moon. Oh, look at it. Something the earliest bits tickles out to, is that all-time highs? Yeah, I mean, that is a cracking trend, isn't it, in Costco? I would be a buyer. Let me get rid of some. I've clearly looked at that before because of lots of old lines on it. I would be assuming it can close at an all-time high today. Then I would be a buyer, and very simply, the place I would have my stop, the absolute closest, would be the other side of 867, and see, is this the next moonshot for Costco? But we just need to bear in mind, it did break out back here, didn't it, in August to all-time highs, and it faffed around for quite a bit, didn't it? So, but I would be a buyer. It's just whether you buy it now or whether you're going to give it a bit more time. Let's see what happens. If you weren't convinced, go short. Go short with a stop at, I don't know, 940. But interesting to see how it all ends today, doesn't it? Isn't it? Let's see. But a great trend. You cannot doubt that trend that's been in place. Yeah, since then, isn't it? Since whenever it is, October 23. Let's see what happens. Supermicro. How about PDD Holdings? Also, aka Temu. Temu. Is that Temu? Is that their cheap Chinese doodah online retailer? Oh, yes, it is, isn't it? Well, that just looks a bit boring, doesn't it? PDD. It had a bit of a run. Had a really good run from March 22. I mean, that's a massive run actually, from $25 to 160 by May 24. Cracking return. And then it's all gone a bit blur again, isn't it? Is it all priced in? No, I don't know. So it's all a bit in the middle of the range for me. So it's not an exciting one for me. So yeah, it doesn't really do it for me, that one, at the moment. But interesting that, I mean, it did have that massive run. What does look exciting at the moment? Let's have a quick flick through these US markets. What is making 1 year highs? How many stocks in the S&P are making 1 year highs? Quite a few. Wow, that is a lot. So just this week, about 163 stocks in the S&P 500 are making new highs. So that's what, 30%, which again you'd expect because the market's going up, isn't it? And the market is not going to go up unless stocks are making new highs. So what looks interesting? Autodesk. I was thinking about buying those earlier this year as well. What's that one? ADP. Axon's gone nuts. What's that? BlackRock, Blackstone, Boston Scientific, old favourite of mine. That's been a great... I was in that earlier this year, and I think I'm probably out of them all now. Brown & Brown. See, all these moves, they're all a bit sudden for me. We need a nice gentle move like Costco, so we can have a nice sensible stop on it. Cintas having a bit of a move. Cognizant. Corpay. There's the old Costco. If that breaks out, there's a lot of gaps this week, isn't there? On look at that, Emerson Electric. That might be interesting, whatever they are. Evergy, EVRG. Might be an interesting one for next week. What's that? Expedia. Is that because everybody's going to be leaving America, do you think? Because I noticed that Booking.com was doing well as well. Booking has had a right old run, all-time highs on that as well. Look at that. Anyway, there we go. Let's get back to what you want to look at. Henkel. What's Henkel? Henkel. Henkel. Which stock is that? Where's the best listing to look? Is it that listing? Oh, it doesn't look like it, does it? What do they do? Henkel. So they're listed in a few places. I'm trying to find the listing with the liquidity, and I can't really find it, to be honest. That one maybe? No. Germany. There we go. Germany is the better one. What do they actually do, Henkel? Let's have a look. Henkel. Chemical company. Industrial and consumer businesses. Blah, blah, oh, hair care products. Blah, 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 blah. Schwarzkopf. Oh, okay. Unibond. All right. A real mix of stuff. I would say that it's arguably a trading buy, that one. What's happened this week with that? Okay, Q3 revenue's up, blah, blah, blah. All right. You could say the trend has been up on Henkel. Looking something like that. So I would be a buyer. There we go. So they're what? €69.70. I would be a buyer. I'd probably like a stop. The other side is 64, which is quite a nice stop, I think, just to see, does this recovery continue? Bang, 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 to see what happens. And has it perhaps overreacted on this week's revenue update? But that's an interesting one. I think the old Henkel. See what happens there. And if that's it, we're done, aren't we? I think. Let's see what these US markets doing. Oh, dear me. This thing is not, so far at least, is not pulling back enough, is it? That's yesterday's close on the S&P. 59.27. No, that's not yesterday's close. That's Wednesday's close on the S&P. What's yesterday's close on the S&P? 59.74. And it's still looking strong. So I'm still long the Nasdaq, which is good. I'd like to buy some more, but the market hasn't pulled back enough for me. I think we're in for an interesting rest of the day to see if it pulls back. I'll do an update in a WhatsApp group this afternoon. Otherwise, we're done, aren't we? So a really interesting week. Let's see what happens next week. US stock markets for me is a big focus. Gold, I think, is interesting. I'll still be a buyer of the dip on that one. Palladium, because it has been absolutely clobbered the last couple of weeks. Does it hold above 980? But all trumped, pardon the pun, by what's going on in US stock markets. So we'll see. We'll come back to it. next week. I think I'll be around next week. So don't forget, if you want to try out, get access to 3 hours of the webinars I've done for the WhatsApp group, go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. Use the code YouTube, sign up to the WhatsApp group. All the descriptions and the links should be in the description to this webinar. That's a nice happy thought to end on. Which stock impact adversely when there is a war? Happy thoughts. Let's not think about that. Let's cross that bridge when we come to it. And that's it. Have a good weekend. Good luck with your trading. We'll do it all next week. Join the WhatsApp group and get updates throughout the day. And let's see where these markets are next week. Okay, thanks for coming along and see you next time.